Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Westmarch Workshop. Tonight, brought to you by BlizzPro.com and Lenovo Gaming. Here, we're at episode 106, Yule Time in the Workshop. Tonight is going to be a little bit shorter, as it's going to be just me, Neinball here, as a solo show for tonight. Want to start off by going through and saying sorry for the delay in the recording of the episode. There was some scheduling conflicts that neither one of us could go through and make. We decided to go through and record it here Monday the 12th, but there was some other things that came up, and so Leviathan wasn't able to go through and join me again. But as they say, the show must go on. And for the astute of you, you might have noticed something a little bit different with the intro, as well as something changed here on our overlays. It's some pretty exciting times here for us over at BlizzPro, that we have entered into a new partnership with Lenovo Gaming. We have gone through and secured a deal with them to go through and do like some little cross promotions here and there, and it's something we here as part of the BlizzPro family are really excited about. They're giving out some new equipment for those of us that are helping out with the podcasts and the shows, so that way we can go through and do our jobs better, make it easier, because that always goes through and helps out. And so it's something that I'm really proud to be a part of. And so we'll see where this goes in the next couple of months. I think that it's something that we will do very well with, and that I'm really looking forward to what we can go through and work on in the future. So if that's something that excites you too, or something that you're interested in checking out, I really suggest that you go and check them out. You can find them on Twitter. They're at twitter.com/Lenovo Gaming, and they're also on Twitch. They're going to be doing a lot of really big pushes for their Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/Lenovo Gaming. They've been doing some work with Linksaria, who is, of course, most of you might know is a big Diablo 3 streamer. That has done some work with Blizzard in the past, and so it's something that I definitely suggest going through and checking out. So I would really excited about this new partnership that we're going through, and including they're gonna work on some more professional kind of like intro segment there than my little improvisation, because we just announced this new project and partnership today. But yeah, look for more interesting things coming in the future. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get on into the show. As we normally open up with our week in gaming. Since our last episode, I know Leviathan has been doing a lot more streaming lately, and has been doing some testing over on the PTR with some changes. There's been some really nice and some unexpected changes that we've seen in the PTR since our last episode. Actually, we would have talked about this last week as it went through and posted that new update on Wednesday, but since things got delayed, we had to wait till now to talk about. But myself, I've been playing a little bit of Diablo 3. I've been trying to do a little bit more streaming. The schedule has been quite full lately, but any free time that I have in the evening where I'm not tuckered out from work, I've definitely been going through and trying to make a bit more of an effort to get out there and do some streaming. But I do have something to admit. I have been playing a lot of Heroes. I know I said that on the last episode, but I've been playing a lot of Heroes lately. It's been the main game that I've been playing. I also played a little bit of Diablo 2. And of course I was streaming a little bit of Diablo 3 last night. Finally got my Hell2 set together for this season. I hope that it's not too late, and that I can do a little bit more of a push in these next few weeks, so that way I can go and get my stash tab before the end of Season 8, which should be ending sometime here in the next few weeks. We're expecting probably like the last week in December, first week in January. We'll peg it at right about the 3-month period, but we'll have to go through and see with how that plays out. But it's definitely been a very slow start of the season for me. But we'll definitely go through and check that out, and see if I can go through and get that stash tab before the end. But I guess that has pretty much been it for my gaming. I could go on and on about everything that I've been doing in Heroes, but you're listening to this as a Diablo show, right? I should note, as many people have pointed out that I've been playing with, I only play Diablo Heroes, so I'm still true, to my game. I've just been having a lot of fun, going through and doing PvP and that aspect. I don't know. I've never been much of a person to be PvP when I first started playing any type of game. But I guess it was really like in World of Warcraft. I really started enjoying like the arenas and battlegrounds, and it was one of the big things that actually got me back into Legion, which I haven't played in a while. But it's like I was playing Legion almost exclusively to PvP, and I stopped a little bit before prestiging the second time, which I really should get back in there and finish that up. But yeah, yeah, that's I guess just how things go. But don't worry, we'll get PvP in Diablo in patch 1.1, right? Right? But moving on, I guess like like I was mentioning, the big thing in news that we've had in this past week is this most recent PTR update, where we've got some changes we were expecting and some changes that we weren't. They had talked a little bit about wanting to go through and address some of the outliers, such as the updated Faithful Memory and the Barber. They now have put a cap on the Faithful Memory, which is the two-handed sword, where when you use Falling Sword, gives you a temporary damage bonus to your Blessed Hammers for the number of enemies that are hit. This now caps at 10, whereas previously it did not have a cap. And it still is proving to be pretty powerful, even with that cap, and it's something that they are willing to go through and look at and change. With that cap, will it be able to knock the lawn bombardment out of the top? It's a little bit hard to say. As with all things on the PTR, it doesn't get a full line of testing, but it definitely is still up there and is still pretty powerful. We'll have to wait and see what other changes that they might go through and make to it. One of them, the Witch Doctor and the Barber, that was changed. That now the way that the Barber worked is that you would not deal direct damage with your Spirit Barrage. It would accumulate on the target, and then it would explode as an AoE as soon as you were done channeling or casting the spell. And what the Barber did in addition to that was also add a multiplier. It would deal 225 to 250% of the accumulated damage that it should have dealt to the target to everything within the 15 yards. Now it just deals the accumulated damage to everything within 15 yards instead of having that modifier added onto it, because it was performing a little bit too good to the developers' tastes, and they feel that just adding in this mechanic to it should be enough to prove it to be pretty viable. This one is a bit more of a group build, where it can be effective while soloing. It's going to get the biggest mileage out of going through and having a dedicated puller to go through and group up mobs. The Witch Doctor can do this on their own with Prawn and NATO, though with its cooldown and kind of the limited reach, it takes a little bit of positioning to go through and get it to work in solo, as opposed to your Helltooth Guard build, which is kind of just a point and click adventure. We'll have to go through and see if the nerf was too much, if they might add a little bit of a damage bonus back onto it. But with the Phantasm rune that kind of like allows it to go through and channel multiple times, it can really add up to do a pretty big explosion if allowed to channel its for a decent amount of time. But the biggest thing that a lot of us were not expecting, given the fact that we didn't see this at the beginning of the PTR, was they went back and they tuned a bunch of the older sets. Not older sets, but they tuned a bunch of class sets. And because they hadn't been doing this, and they hadn't even talked about this so much at BlizzCon, that it was kind of a surprising thing to see that they would actually go back and take the time in this balance update to also tune some of the underperforming sets, such as Wrath of the Wastes, and It now, instead of boosting the Dust Devil damage for the 6-piece set bonus, it increases all whirlwind damage. So even though it will still gain the Dust Devil effect when you go through and equip it, it's not going to be just making it so that way the Dust Devils are what kills the mobs, and that it's going to be the actual whirlwinding itself that will go and deal the majority of your damage. I don't know if that's kind of a mechanics change or a play change, but I haven't seen too much talk about this one so far. It has only been a week, or not even a week, since this change went live. Whether this it's already kind of a decent farming build for barbs, how this will affect or change that gameplay. But another one is the Roland's Legacy, which it's never been all that high in terms of the hierarchy of the Crusader sets. Even when it debuted, most people still flocked to Akans because at the beginning it felt very squishy. It didn't have a lot of survivability. That was been the biggest bane for Crusaders since they've launched with Reaper. But this one addressed some of it. It upped the damage bonus for Shield Bash and Sweep Attack from 750% to 1,250%. And it also has further upped the damage reduction, where that was added in not too long ago, where the stacks that gave attack speed also were giving the 10% damage reduction, stacking up to 50%. It now is a 15% damage reduction, stacking up to 75. We'll see if this helps address a lot of the squishiness issues that Roland's still kind of has, that prevents it from really getting up there and going toe to toe with the other sets. We also have Demon Hunters Marauders set. Now the 6-piece set bonus increases your the spender damage by 1,200% weapon damage as opposed to 800% for each active sentry that you have. So that's going to be a pretty noticeable increase in damage there. And I guess even though Unhallowed Essence was definitely the better of the two, I more preferred the playstyle of Marauders than Unhallowed Essence. So going through and seeing this set change when I plan on rolling a Demon Hunter next season, it was definitely something that I'm excited to go through and try out and see how far I can go with Marauders. Although, I mean, I'm still going to have an Unhallowed Essence because it's just like the go-to farming build. It's probably like the best farming build that's out there. But I definitely like seeing Marauders get some love. Monks got their buff in Ina's Mantra. The damage bonus granted by your Mystic allies has been buffed from 50% per ally to 100% per ally. Witch Doctors, the Spirit of Erekir, instead of giving a 1,500% bonus to all of your creature skills, it's now being buffed to a 2,400% bonus. So those speedrunning Witch Doctors are definitely getting a bonus there. That's something that I've been running with, that I talked about a little bit last night on my stream. Is weird because you have to find that difficulty where you can one-shot elites with your Angry Chicken. And so with my particular build, I didn't have an ancient weapon yet, and I'd been focusing most of my blood shards into completing my Helltooth. So I was just running like as is, and so it was leaving me in kind of like the Torment 7, Torment 8 kind of difficulty, and then for Greater Rifts, sitting around Greater Rift 40 was the rank that I could go and still be able to one-shot elites. And then as soon as you go like one higher with like the Witch Doctor, it dramatically reduces your clear times on it. Because if you have to go and sit and channel Fire Bats or do another round of Angry Chicken to kill an elite, it like almost doubles the amount of time that it takes for you to kill the elite packs instead of just going through, exploding, turning back into a chicken, and running on to the next one. So that will definitely be nice of being able to like up that initial ceiling that a Witch Doctor can farm with, getting that Spirit of Erekir. Don't know if it will, how effective it will be as far as pushing it into the like higher end Greater Rifts to compete with Helltooth, but we'll have to wait and see. I think this one is just going to be more of a quality of life change for Witch Doctors to help out with their, already their go-to speed farming build. And finally, we have Wizards, of course, not left out of this little update party that we have going on here, where the 6-piece set bonus, which increases the amount of damage that enemies take when affected by slow time by certain skills. Got buffed from 2,000 to 2,800%. So yeah, some pretty nice changes all across the board. Pretty much all the classes, definitely all the classes got a little bit of a tune to some of their underperforming sets. Some of them will not be ones that are meant to contend with the leaderboards and greater rifts, but will definitely help out some people go through and getting like a farming set together so that they can easier go and get their super powerful set to further push, on the leaderboards, or get, their greater rift 75 clears for their seasonal journeys and what have you. But yeah, there were also some minor little hot fixes that came out recently. Like one of the biggest ones was just the Leaper Angels were just getting the Juggernaut a fix, and so you might have run into them where they had maybe too many affixes, or they just were always running into always having the Juggernaut affix on them. That they resolved that issue, and then they also fixed a problem where Faithful Memory was not properly buffing the damage of certain runes on Blessed Hammer, so that way you couldn't effectively test out everything with it. So it's nice to see them going through and going and making little changes. I'm kind of intrigued by that Juggernaut affix, hotfix. That's saying fix a lot, but it was, they already kind of had an ability of the Juggernaut affix, because whenever they leapt, they could not die, they could still take damage, but they also were immune to CC, during that little leap. So was some of the coding for the Juggernaut affix taken from that mechanic effect and then, added into the mob in general? And was that just the fact that that code was already in the creature causing it to just fully gain the Juggernaut affix every time? It's little things like that I would love to go through and hear, like what happened, where was how did the code bug out, so to say, in that respect? Like, what was the interaction that was going there when it already, because you're adding in this new affix to make them immune to CC, and they already had some component of it, where, I don't know, just something that I found kind of interesting. And speaking of the Juggernaut affix, I kind of talked about it briefly on the previous episode, but we were going off on a tangent and I got sidetracked pretty quickly. But I didn't really have a chance to talk too much about the Juggernaut affix. And I know this one would probably apply to Leviathan more so than myself, but just how it's kind of playing out at the higher end. I know it was something that was designed to add a little bit more diversity. That seems to be a big push that they've been doing with this patch, where they're adding more diversity to the mob types. The elites are no longer tied to the mobs that are spawning in the rift, so you might have a rift that's just zombies, the spear throwing goatmen, and Mulgors, and then you have a Lacunae spawn as an elite. That it's no longer has any correlation between them whatsoever. That's actually causing a little bit of a point of contention with some of the higher end people, or the higher end rift runners, because there's already so few rifts that they can go and compete on to try and get their highest level rift clear for the season. They spend most of their time going and fishing for like the perfect rift. I want to say that this change was on the dev side to try and make it so that way they are a bit more forced to push towards that clear. Now it just, from some of the conversations I've had with like the likes of like Empyrean Gaming and such, that it actually makes it that they have to fish even more, and so it is kind of losing a little bit of their drive for those getting those high-end clears. It's a very frustrating change for some of the top end players, because they're already having to go through and be like, well, 70% of the mob types in the greater rifts are just not good to fight against, and so we're only looking for a rift that's comprised of this 30% of these different mob types, which are easy to kill or give a certain amount of rift completion. If you get something that's all shadow beast and bees, then it's not going. You can clear every single mob on the entire level, and it's not going to get you very far into the completion for your greater rift, just because they're barely worth anything. They're easy to kill, but at the same time, they don't give you very much contribution towards completing the rift. And now that the elites themselves are not tied to the mob types, when they go through and they see, okay, we have some good mob types, let's go through and clear. Oh, now we get an annoying mob that just spawned, like a burrower or something like that, where you're going to go through and you're trying to kill them, and it keeps burrowing under before you can kill any of the minions, and so it's just increasing your clear time. In addition to that, you have the Juggernaut affix, where it's like if they get a Juggernaut affix on an elite mob, they just leave it behind. It's not engaging. It just means we ignore this one. They come to the second elite, and if that's also a Juggernaut, or if it's not going to be an elite that's worth fighting, that's it. Rift over, clear it, exit game, start a new rift, and let's keep going. And so it's increased that grind fest for some of these top end players, with the detachment of the elite spawning as the same mob types of the rift, and the Juggernaut affix, where it might be a bit more interesting for your casual player, is not even going to come into play for your high end. I believe I watched some of Leviathan streams on the PTR where he encounters a Juggernaut, and okay, let's get up on the horse and just keep going, particularly because they're immune to Bane of the Trapped. And so a huge amount of your damage is already, cut short. If you have a decently leveled Bane of the Trap, you're talking about, oh, well, this mob now takes 40 to 50% less damage than any of the other mobs. It's not worth fighting, period. So I don't know if that would be something that they could code where, even though it's immune to CC, it still is affected by, so that way Bane of the Trap could still come into play, because at the moment, I guess I can see from the developer standpoint of trying to make something that would reduce the power of Bane of the Trap, since it's been at the top since the beginning and just will continue to be at the top until they make something even more powerful than it. Then Bane of the Trap is just going to be number 2. It's not going to be so much replaced. It will just be pushed down into your the tiers of the legendary gems that you go to equip. But it's one of those ones where the bonus is just so good that instead of contemplating giving it up, we'll just skip the mobs. It's like the Juggernaut, it's just not worth fighting. I'm just going to skip it. Or if I don't have decent movement skills in order to go and get by it, or it's annoying rift, I'm just going to hearth out and restart the rift. So we'll have to wait and see. I'd be interested in hearing the developers' thoughts and feedback on what players have been finding with the PTR so far, with the Juggernaut affix and the increased diversity. I feel the increased diversity will probably definitely be a boon for more players like me that take the seasons a bit more casually. It'll just be kind of fun seeing the different mob types, and it'll shake things up a little bit. But I can also understand the frustrations of those people that are going through and trying to get those, the top 10, top 5, top spot on the leaderboards. And while we're talking about leaderboards, there was a little bit of a conversation that we had on Twitter about that Leviathan and Monstrous had brought up about maybe changing the way that leaderboards go and work when it comes to seasons, to where instead of having a leaderboard set specifically for a class, maybe dividing a class down into individual sets, so that way you have everyone's competing on, well, I have a Demon Hunter that's competing on the Legacy of Nightmare leaderboard, as well as the Marauders leaderboard. And there was a lot of interesting discussions that went through and came about that. I know Monstrous and Leviathan were pretty adamant and really supported the decision. I was a bit more skeptical about it, because I think that would just add a little bit more, it would kind of be more divisive than it would be engaging for a lot of the community. That's just my thoughts on it. That I feel that people would then at that point where there is definitely some misgiving still about not all of the sets being equal, and the developers are 100% okay with that. You might have a set that will not clear, Greater Rift 95, but is actually still really good at farming. You of course are going to have instances like the Demon Hunter where the Unhallowed Essence is just your catch-all, but you'll also have other ones, like a Witch Doctor, where if you're wanting to go through and speed farm, you might be running something like a Jades or a Spirit of Erikir, and then for your pushing, you're going to be going through and using Helltooth. And they're 100% okay with that. They would like the sets, of course, to be a little bit closer, or maybe specialize the set a little bit more to make it even better at farming once that one has kind of come out and shown itself to be, this is the farming build. Well, let's go through and make that really shine as the farming build. But if you then go through and put every set up on a leaderboard and have them competing, whereas I know that the idea is that, well, I'm competing personally on the Marauders leaderboard, it will also, of course, draw attention to, oh, I'm competing on the Shadows leaderboard, and damn, look how far behind I am from, the Marauders or the Unhallowed Essence leaderboards. Man, Shadows needs a buff. It's gonna. That's what I think that is gonna go and lead to. That it'll add a greater level of scrutiny on how these sets interplay compared to one another. Whereas people right now already love to go and complain that, oh, wizards are OP, or whatever X class will be OP next season because of Y change. That now they're going to be going through and talking about, oh, my Zunimasa's build has just been at the bottom of the barrel for the past year. When are you going to go through and buff it? Look at the leaderboards. I'm not even anywhere close to what they're doing with the Helltooth or the Legacy of Nightmares, and that's just something we do hear a little bit from time to time, that some of the sets could use a buff. But I think people are more or less happy with the way that it plays out. And if you're someone that is trying to push, like, I have, the highest cons clear out of all Crusaders, you probably know, because you can go to like DiabloProgress.com and you can go and break that down and kind of see what individual people are playing, what specs they use to go and clear those greater rifts. So there are tools out there so you can see how you place with other people that might be using the same set. Maybe if a compromise to that would be the Blizzard opening up the API a little bit in order to better record some of that information for sites like Diablo Progress, so that way they could better differentiate and break it out better to see how the classes are performing without having to go and put that directly into the Blizzard UI itself. And it's just some ideas of how things could go and come about. That more or less covers it as far as a lot of the official stuff, but there is definitely one other thing that I wanted to go and bring up. This is an article that was written by Dredscythe, the wonderful person that went and developed all of our overlays. You got to go and hear us talk about at BlizzCon. Some of you that were there got to go and meet him. He does a lot of the graphical work for all of the shows and just Blizz Pro in general. And he has been doing this series on Diablo.blizzpro.com called Development Hell, where previously he's gone and looked into some of the design series or problematic systems that might have existed within the game, issues that he would like to see addressed, and then of course going through and giving ways that he would interpret a change or a benefit to the game. And this one, instead of looking back at something that already exists, he's actually looking forward and doing his take on challenge rifts, on what he thinks that challenge rift could be developed into or made into. And it is definitely a lengthy article, but it is worth all the time that you would take to go and read it, because he really goes through and extrapolates out a really awesome system of what challenge rifts could potentially become. And a brief description of what his system is instead of being something a bit separate from the game, like kind of like the indications that we got at BlizzCon, it would be just another tier in the Nephilim altar, where you already have your regular rifts and greater rifts. You'd have a new option for challenge rifts, and you could queue up as a party, everyone going through and picking a particular class that they could go and do. And it's something where you could either party up, where you could party up and work on an objective together. A free for all where it would have up to a 4-man race to see who could complete this particular rift the fastest, or set it up into two-man teams to see which team itself could complete it the fastest, making this into a far more competitive option. And he also did some amazing makeup. Sorry I don't have any images to show you here up in the overlay, but it's definitely something I would recommend that you go and check out. He also went through and even did a video to kind of go and give a little visual representation of what he wanted these challenge rifts to become, and where you could go and see the progress bar change colors to see as like an indication of who is winning that particular challenge rift. So definitely go through and check it out, so that way you could see his idea of what the challenge rift system could turn into. And it's something that I'm definitely interested in, because I would like to see the challenge rifts, whenever they do debut, to be a hit, to be something that brings some more competitive feeling back into the game, and something that of course could be built upon to add more of that competitive mindset into Diablo 3. Maybe, since PvP itself is kind of already out of the equation for Diablo 3, I think. I love making the joke that don't worry, we'll still be getting it in patch 1.1. I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that PvP is kind of written off for the rest of Diablo 3. It's something we may definitely look forward to for Diablo Next, whenever we might hear anything about that in the next couple of years. But the challenge rifts is definitely something we could get that would add some more engaging competitiveness than just the Greater Rift leaderboards. This is something that you could go and do a stream of, at a dream hack or something like that. Might not have the same level of competitiveness that, say, a game of Hearthstone or Heroes would have, but just speaking from experience, that some of the greatest moments of prior BlizzCons for me has been the raid races that Blizzard has put on, where you have two very capable raid teams go through and try to complete, Siege of Orgrimmar or Ulduar, ICC, go and complete some of these, high-end raids in the fastest possible time that they can. They're both streaming at the same time. They're up live on stage at BlizzCon, and they're having to go through. And you can see, I think one of the last ones that they did, the Siege of Orgrimmar, was a bit of a letdown, because one of the raid guilds, killed a boss in like 2 attempts, and then proceeded to just continue to go on and clear the instance, where the other raid team had wiped like 5 or 6 times, and so at that point there really was no coming back. Some of the other ones, though, were a bit closer, and they would go through and be like, oh, well, we're like a minute behind them when we got to like this one particular boss, so we're gonna cut a healer. And these normally were 10-man raids, and so you're talking about cutting from 2 down to 1. Like, they take these really risky decisions so that way they can go and potentially get ahead. It's not something that you can emulate as well, like in a one-player Rift race, but it's something like Dredscythe's mock-up that he had of the teams, where you have the two-player teams going and competing for it. Or if we go through and further expand this out and have 2 full 4-player teams going and competing side by side, that'd be pretty interesting to see. If they go, depending upon the level of difficulty that they bake into these challenge rifts, that can if they're falling behind, can they do some sort of play that will, where it might be risky, will go and get them ahead. If it's a 4-player level 100 Greater Rift or whatever, well, let's go and send this one guy out to go and solo this elite pack while the rest of us go and push towards floor 2. Could be something, because we're behind, we have to get that one extra elite out of the way. Who knows? It could be something that they could work on and further push towards. I would really, really excited for whenever they begin to go and start pushing those challenge rifts. One, I guess, kind of like last thing that I had that I wanted to talk about. That if you were watching my stream last night, I kind of talked a little bit. I was just going and thinking about the necromancer. We have that necromancer skill contest going on, which crikey, I probably should have mentioned this earlier. But for the necromancer skill contest, that's something that we wanted to do together to go and announce the winner. And since Leviathan couldn't make it, we are holding off a little bit. So I am extending the deadline for the necromancer skill entries. We did have quite a few entries go through and come in. We have some really good ones and some people that have fleshed out quite a bit of skills and gameplay for the necromancer. So I don't want to deter anybody, but we are going to go through and extend this one out. So now you have until 5 p.m. Eastern on December 21st, which will be the next episode, to go and submit some of your necromancer skills in to go through and win one of these lovely, stylish Diablo, if I can get that on the camera properly, Diablo challenge coins that were a BlizzCon exclusive. So definitely recommend, if you haven't already, if you thought you missed the deadline, go ahead, get that into us. Send in your entry to Westmarch Workshop at blizzpro.com, so that way we have some time to read through it and pick the best. And again, so just submit your entry to Westmarch Workshop at blizzpro.com by 5 p.m. Eastern on December 21st in time for our next episode. And we'll go through, pick the winner, and send that one out as a little pre-Christmas gift. There are no stipulations. Like I said, I'm willing to ship internationally, so from any corner of the globe, please feel free to go through and submit that one in there. And Shadow went through and said, "I see what you did there, fleshed out." Yeah, that was a little necromancer joke. Undead skellies and all that. But yeah, I kind of been thinking a lot about like the necromancer and some things that they could do with it as a class. And if you want to take this as as a jumping point for your own entry into the contest, so be it. Probably will weigh it a little bit less just because it's my own idea. But I was looking at some of the things that they have within the game that are not well expanded upon, trying to put it into words what my thoughts are on. And when you look at all the stats that exist within the game, most of them have a place for all the classes and all the specs. Everyone wants main stat, everyone wants vitality. All resist plays a little bit more towards the melee classes, armor a little bit more towards the intellect classes. Crit damage, attack speed kind of in there for some particular builds. Cooldown reduction is usually important for everybody, but more important is central to some builds, but it's not a bad stat for others. Resource cost reduction is just meh. A lot of people will benefit from area damage, but it has a pretty good representation across all classes, with the only outlier being Thorn's Crusaders. They don't care about crit. They don't care about crit damage. They actually don't even care about weapon damage. The only things they care about are attack speed. Vitality is almost as important as main stat to them as far as damage output. And then Thorns damage. Like, Thorns is like the only thing that they really care about, and going through and upping that particular number. And not only are they, that outlier in terms of the stats that they don't find useful, they're an outlier in the fact that they're the only class in the game right now that finds Thorns useful at all. And you look back at some of the Necromancer archetypes from Diablo 2, one thing that definitely jumps out to my mind after having played Diablo 2 a little bit this past month is Iron Maiden. That was a pretty decent skill for necromancers, and helping skellymancers through normal and nightmare. It loses its effectiveness in hell since you can't stack Iron Maiden in amplify damage to get around physical immunities. But whereas a Thorns or a Paladin was definitely very nice, a Necromancer could do it with an Iron Golem almost equally as well. And just the fact that if they do want to replicate all of the skills of the Necromancer within the game, the fact that you have the Iron Golem in Iron Maiden as some of the big archetypes, particularly Iron Golem, is something that I've seen a lot of people asking about. Like, how are you going to do it? Since it used to require you giving up an item to create the Golem, and it was unique for the Necromancer pets because it was the only one that would survive between closing the game. Even though your golems, were just summons, in Iron Golem, if it died, it died. You lost it. It wasn't just something that you could go through and easily resummon. You had to throw another item out on the ground in order to go through and bring it back. But it also stayed in between games. So that is one thing that kind of got me thinking, could they take this kind of Thorns build that they built for Crusaders and expand upon it a little bit and make a Thorns Necromancer? I maybe not so much expect that to be one of the one or two sets that the Necromancer launches with. I see that more as either a summoning or a corpse explosion build, or both, for those first two sets. But that is something I would love to see, if we could go through and see another Thorns class come into play, depending upon, of course, how much the developers like how Invokers and the Legacy of Nightmare Thorns Crusaders have played out. Hopefully they're not too passive in terms of their playstyle, and then of course developing that into how would it play for a Necromancer that would also distinguish it from a Thorns Crusader. And just going through and thinking, you already have a couple of items like Heart of Iron and such that go and support it. You just have to throw a couple things that would buff, say, the Iron Golem or Iron Maiden skill. How would the Iron Maiden skill itself work? You could, of course, have a whole series of skills, all based off of Decrepify, one of the skills that we did see in the Necromancer demo. Some of the runes for that one could turn it into Amplify damage, where the enemies just take increased damage. It could also be turned into Lower Resist, where it increases their damage taken, from particular, different types of skills or what have you. Or you could also then turn it into Iron Maiden, where it increases the amount of damage that the mobs take from Thorns. This could also be like a party buff to other, Thorns Crusaders, or it could just go and make it so that way, all enemies in the inflicted area, are only take increased Thorns damage from you. But something to that respect, and your Iron Golem could just go through and it deals damage equal to 3,000% of your Thorns damage, or has an aura where any time an enemy is hits it does Thorns damage and a proc around it. But it's just some interesting things that could go and build upon that Thorns gameplay a little bit, and it just it's something I would like to see them build upon if of course they thought that the Invoker Crusader ended up being successful. It is definitely successful from a performance standpoint of how well it does, both in speed runs and the higher greater rift clears. But if the developers are happy with how the gameplay of it turned out, so that's just one of my little thoughts that I had on the stream last night about some of the things that they could do with the Necromancer going forward. And again, please go through. Feel free to submit, your ideas. You got one extra week in case we did have like some last minute submissions this past week for the Necromancer contest. And so if you missed the deadline, but still had something that you wanted to turn in, go ahead, shoot it in. What's the worst that could happen? And like we mentioned before, we do plan on sending all of the feedback over the developers, since they're still in the process of going and creating the Necromancer, and they are looking for input from the community of what they would like to see and like what a Necromancer means to them. They've already said a Necromancer just isn't a class from Diablo 2. it's 16 years of player experiences, so they want to make the Necromancer work, and well, the only way that they can do that is with our help. And so I definitely ask all of our listeners here to go share your feedback and experiences with what the Necromancer meant to you. And that was part of the reason why we did this little contest. One, to reward our listeners, with some nice treats, that they might not have been able to have gotten if they didn't make it out to BlizzCon. Well, at the same time, having a little bit of feedback that we could then go through and help the other half of the Diablo community, the developers. That does kind of bring me to the end of a lot of things I had to go through and talk about here. I did not have any items of the week for this week. It seems that we took most of the people went through and decided to go and submit the things for the Necromancer contest. And it's towards the end of the season, so I know that there's some burnout, not a lot of people playing, or not anything that people think that they have worth showing off on the show. But please, never feel bad about going through and sending in something on the show. Like we've shown plenty of non-ancient items on the show, just because they still manage to roll good stats like that near perfect Dead Man's Legacy that would probably still outperform most ancient Dead Man's Legacies just because of the stats that it went and rolled up. And so because a lot of the feedback and things that we had to cover were part and tied to the Necromancer. I know we do still have like the 2 emails to go and read over from the last episode, but I'm gonna go ahead and save most of those for our next episode. And again, if you want to go and submit anything to the show, please feel free to leave us any feedback that you like. Our email address is westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com, so that way you can send us, your player stories. You can send us in your items. That's where you want to send in, your Necromancer skills if you want to partake in the contest. We'll have other contests coming up, in the future, so you have more chances to win those challenge coins, so don't fret. You can also follow us on Twitter. We're at the WM Workshop, and you can find us here every other Wednesday night, mostly. I know that this week we are a little bit delayed in filming, but you can find us at twitch.tv/BlizzPro at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and you can find pretty much all the things that we talked about here on the show and more at diablo.blizzpro.com. We are also in game. We are the BlizzPro clan. We have lots of free spaces, so feel free to go through and join if you have any interest in going and playing with us for Season 9. Season 9 looks to go through and be a lot bigger than the past couple of seasons, so we're expecting player activity to be a little bit higher, and like usual, spots will probably end up drying up, so it'd be best to get in your applications early if you're looking to play. And of course, we do have kind of like a 2-week requirement, so if you've been inactive for 2 weeks, you'll probably be booted from the clan. No hard feelings. You can always go through and reapply and get back in. It's just, we always want to try and keep spots available for the clan itself. If you're in a clan with friends and don't want to go through and leave, you can always join us. We're the Westmarch Workshop community. You just do a search in the community panel to go through and find us. You can also come hang out and chat with us. I've actually been spending most nights in our Discord channel that you can find at discord.gg/BlizzPro. I've been playing Heroes quite a bit with some members of the community here and there, but if you want to, you can go through and join. I'm normally on later, so you're going to be looking at midnight Eastern for when I go and hop on there, but it's always fun to go through and chat with people. If you're looking for us individually, as you can see in our lovely overlay designed here, of course, by Dredscythe, I am at Neinball Gamer, and my co-host, who is not appearing in this episode, is at Leviathan D3. If you want to check out our individual streams, you can go through and check us out. Leviathan is at twitch.tv/Leviathan111, and you can find me at twitch.tv/Neinball. And again, I just want to go through and say thank you both to BlizzPro.com and Lenovo Gaming for going through and sponsoring us to go and try and help push our platform, even further than what we have done in the past. Really looking forward to what this could mean for us as both a network and as just a podcast individually. And I definitely cannot wait to go through and get my hands on some new gaming equipment and go and testing that out. Now, I don't exactly have a potato, but as Eldorian has pointed out to me, it's beginning to sprout buds. So with that, thank you, everybody, and good night.